time to earn it.
Nice! Shot out! Woo, that's good!
Planted. Target my mark. Throwing smoke.
Shot!
Enemy mark. Target my mark.
This is why I prefer swords.
Done. Let's go.
Nice!
Guns dry. Hostiles. Enemy mark. Throwing smoke.
We need to be good team players for the...
Go, go, go!
Damn it! Don't mind if I do.
Take that!
Ah, what the hell? Got him. Incoming smoke! Processing. Shock out! Hold up. We're not done yet.
I can't even get out of my goddamn gun!
Now on this! This'll do.
Let's do this! Going slow!
Blocking my shot! Oh, good! More senseless slaughter!
Rock and roll.
Tried so hard, but look at me, crawling in the dirt.
I'm on your side. This'll do.
Just what I need! Fire in the hole!
I hope you're bulletproof.
Time to do some damage!
Nice.
Enemy contact!
Nearby!
Target my mark! it. Nope. Hey, hey! Drag out! You're not so tough!
Yeah!
Putting down a grenade! Down! Free me!
Hey! Hold me!
deserve it! Nice. Throwing smoke!
Not cool, man!
Dead!
God damn it!
Hold up. I'm not done. Huh, needed that.
Yeah, it's ass kicking time.
Let's do this.
I owe you one.
Serves me right.
I was in you. Bleeding out.
Smoke out! Smoke out! Not my first rodeo, you know.
Get up! What the fuck was it? Anybody else see that?
I'll just help myself. I know. My mark!
Throwing smoke! What's in there?
Dead already?
Throwing smoke.
You're done!
You're good to go.
Watch your hands! Throwing smoke!
Dibs.
Throwing smoke! God damn pain in the ass.
Oh yeah! What? Dead already?
This'll do.
Good to go. Pathetic ominous.
Let's go fuck their shit up!
gonna hurt.
Incoming smoke! Smoke out! Smoke out! Throwing smoke! I'll take that. Throwing smoke!
You can't crawl forever!
Target my mark!
Hey, how about you take point?
Alright, let's do this!
Still got it.
Down they go.
functioning of society. However, being part of a group should never be at the expense of our own individuality. We should never get so scared of being ostracized that we do not say the things that matter to us for the fear of being judged. We need to realize that we will get to a point in our lives where we begin to assess everything that we've been taught as children. When you start to outgrow old beliefs and walk into new ones, do not be held back by the fear of what everyone who you grew up with would think. Caring about what other people think is necessary for the proper functioning of society. But when caring what other people think affects our abilities to make decisions for ourselves, that's when you need to pause and reconsider. You're a person with their own thoughts, ideas, dreams, and goals. Don't let the fear of being disliked hold you back from expressing that. You want to drop out of school and become a comedian? What would people think? You want to start a YouTube channel? What would people think? You want to be with someone from a different culture or religion? What would people think? This one question holds so many people back from doing what they love. It's like a chain that binds our neck and leaves us no room to breathe. We're like circus elephants, held back by a rope that might only exist in our imagination. Ultimate freedom is having the courage to be disliked. The boldness to stand firm in what you believe in, even when the crowd is saying something else. The courage to stand when everyone else is sitting, and run when everyone else is standing. The courage to be your authentic self, regardless of what everyone around you tells you to be instead. Developing the courage to be disliked is
Smoke!
not easy. Remember that it's in our nature to care what other people think. Sort of stray from that even minutely would mean going against our very own biology, and that's never very easy. But the good news is that we can actually do it. The first and most important thing to realize is that you are a chicken. Yes, you are. You look around and sometimes wonder why your owner takes such good care of you. At first, you're not sure. you're skeptical. What if he sends you to the slaughterhouse? You've never been there, but you know very well none of your friends have ever come out of that place. You remain on high alert for when that fateful day might arrive. But it never does. Days go by, and then weeks, months, even years. You are now convinced your owner loves you more than any of these other chickens, and he would never do anything bad to you. Each passing day is additional evidence to say that you will live for the next. 1,000 days go by like this. 1,000 beautiful days. Until, of course, the 1,001st day, when the illusion of safety breaks, and you end up on someone's dinner plate. You should have never crossed the road. Now imagine how betrayed the chicken must have felt when it was being taken to that terrifying part of the farm. Given the 1,000 days worth of evidence, the chicken's trust in its owner is ironically at its highest level when it was eventually slaughtered. Perhaps, if it wasn't so foolish to believe that it was special or unique, maybe it would have at least been spared the feelings of betrayal. That one final day completely changed the outlook of the chicken's life. That one piece of evidence outweighed the previous 1,000 days. And it's not even a contest. This is something known as a black swan. A single event or observation that comes as a surprise with disproportionate consequences, radically changing the outlook of thoughts. People used to think that swans could only be white, until they saw a black swan, which basically reshaped the way people thought about what is out there. The St. Nicholas Taleb wrote a book called The Black Swan, The Impact of the Higher Improbable, to study this very phenomenon and shine light on how vulnerable we are to black swans, and how we are only becoming increasingly more vulnerable with each passing day. In his book, he talks about some fundamentals of epistemology that limit our ability to understand the black swans before they happen. But first, let's talk about why our modern society, as technologically advanced as it is the perfect nesting place for a black swan event. Let's say we're going to weigh a few thousand people, and at the extreme end of that sample contains the heaviest person in the world. So long as that person is subject to biological constraints like the rest of us, it doesn't really matter how much he or she weighs. Let's say 2,000 pounds. Now, how much do you think that accounts for in the total weight of all the people we weighed? The answer is probably less than 0.5%. It shows that even a crazy outlier like a 2,000 pound person doesn't really overwhelm the average. Taleb calls this ecosystem mediocrity, to refer to how the mediocre measurements of the average person do mostly represent all measurements quite well. Now, let's conduct the same experiment, but with wealth. Let's gather a few people and include just one of the 3,000 or so billionaires in that list. How much do you think that billionaire accounts for in the total wealth of all the people in that sample? An overwhelming majority, almost always close to 99%. Contrary to the first scenario, here the outlier overwhelms everything else. Taleb calls this world extremism, as it rewards a few people extremely well, but leaves basically nothing for the others. Taleb says that the modern world is composed of circumstances that are geared towards extremism, not mediocrity, because money, for all intents and purposes, is just a number in someone's book. The vast majority of money is completely digital. It's not subject to physics laws or biology to constrain it to minimal variance. Sure, most people don't make that much money, but a few people can make a lot of money. Similarly, if you want to consider musicians, most musicians don't sell that many albums, but a few artists sell quite a few. You can conduct the same thought experiment with book sales, scientific publications, shoe brands, and so on. Point is, the modern economy is very much a winner-take-all system that rewards a very small number of people with a disproportionately large portion of the pie. If it was more like the weight example we just talked about, you wouldn't expect the outliers to be so wild. But the fact that they really are indeed so wild just goes to show how unpredictable the environment we're living in really is. The forecasts we take for granted today often fail to take into account the true nature of this unpredictability, these black swan events. You might be inclined to say that, no, these billionaires put in the work day in and day out, and therefore they can enjoy the fruits of their labor. Indeed, most of them probably worked really hard. Some of their innovations might later pave the way for a better future for all of us. I'm not discounting that. However, the system is not rewarding them proportionately. More importantly, it's hard to say how much of their efforts are the fruits of their labor and how much of it is due to pure chance. If you were to run a few simulations with extremist-type circumstances, you would inevitably have a few Jeff Bezos-like outliers. We may be biased into thinking that we understand what causes Bezos-like outliers in our society. You know, the usual. Think out of the box, start a revolutionary company, work extremely hard for a few years, and then smell the roses. Happily ever after. We've all read the autobiographies. We've all watched the documentaries. However, when was the last time you read about a person who did all of those things and failed? When was the last time you saw shelves of books about people who failed? Chances are, probably never. These stories just never really quite make it. There is an epistemic bias in all of this. Taleb says, now take a look at the cemetery. It is quite difficult to do so, because people who fail don't seem to write memoirs, and if they did, those business publishers I know would not even consider giving them the courtesy of a returned phone call. This is despite the fact that, often, advice about what not to do is more useful than what to do. But that's just the economy. That's just one facet of society. We also don't understand the socio-political aspects. Take 9/11 for example, which is certainly a black swan event. After it happened, you had tons of experts come out and say that they had known for years that it was about to happen. Well, why didn't they say anything? This retrospective distortion of the understanding of a problem is one of the hallmarks of a black swan event. None of them really knew. If they did, cockpit doors would have been bulletproof long ago, pocket knives would have never been allowed in cabins, and the TSA would have been invented much earlier. But these things were only instituted after 9/11. If you were to suggest such policies in 1991, for example, you would probably not be taken too seriously, or would have been shown a spreadsheet that suggested airlines don't have the money for bulletproof doors. But inevitably, they did. Thankfully, the likelihood of a 9/11 style event is much lower now than it used to be. Countries around the world are more prepared, more vigilant. However, that also makes these precautions somewhat lose their relevance. Yuval Noah Harari, in his book Homo Deus, cites a paradox about knowledge. He says, knowledge that does not change behavior is useless, but knowledge that changes behavior loses its relevance. The more data we have and the better we understand history, the faster history alters its course, and the faster our knowledge becomes outdated. Despite the measures we have taken for a black swan event like 9/11, that does nothing to improve our odds against a future black swan. If anything, it might lure us into a false sense of security, and in fact worsen our chances of coping with the impacts of the next highly improbable event. We tend to convince ourselves that we understand risks once we have understood a game of dice or blackjack. However, trying to approximate the risks in real life with the same methods used in a closed-loop artificial game is simply oversimplification, a mistake that we commit daily. This, Taleb calls, is the ludic fallacy. We learn simple games and immediately conclude that the stock market works in the same way, even though one of these things lives in Mediocristan and the other lives in Extremistan. If the markets were well understood, do you think something like GameStop or AMC would have ever been allowed to happen? Sure, short squeezing is not a particularly new phenomenon, and yet, even a non-black swan event such as this one left even the smartest hedge fund managers scratching their heads and practically chasing bankruptcy. This false sense of understanding makes black swans that much more dangerous. There are other reasons why we are increasingly more vulnerable to black swans. Taleb said whereas in the past people might have been studying different kinds of literature and diving deep into a locally developed set of ideas, today, arguably the most read book is Harry Potter. That's of course not to say Harry Potter is a bad book or anything, but it goes to show that we are much less in tune with each other's ideas, for better or for worse. For the most part, everyone is dealing with generally the same ideas. That coupled with the rising complexity and reach of technology means when something fails, it fails for more people than ever before. The Pakistani government tried to shut down YouTube in Pakistan. It ended up shutting down YouTube worldwide, Taleb cited. We don't understand these things. That's just one way for technology to fail. But it goes to show how interconnected things are. And while that is often touted as a plus, given sufficiently poor luck, that can really spell doom for us all. Take coronal mass ejections as an example. These are regular bursts of radiation from the sun that scientists on Earth know and expect. The largest coronal mass ejection ever on record is the Carrington event in 1859. Its effects were mostly felt by telegraph operators who had some of their equipment burnt from the sudden surge. Most of the world went on without a hitch. On the other hand, if If a Carrington-class event were to occur today, with all the grids, electric cars, and equipment that we now have, the damages would be in the trillions of dollars, and repair could take decades if at all possible. And with each passing day, with each little transition into an electric future, we're becoming more and more vulnerable to such an event. The thing is, this isn't even a Black Swan event. In 2012, the likelihood of a Carrington event in the next decade was calculated to be around 12%. And yet, despite that high probability, we're not particularly prepared for such an event. Given the esoteric nature of its risk, seemingly low probability but high impact, despite all the mounting evidence, we'll have a very hard time convincing governments to make modifications to power grids to avoid catastrophic failures. So if that's how little we care about an event that we know is bound to occur eventually, imagine how unaware we are of a true black swan. The chicken in the farm, were it to somehow be spared by some miracle, would never trust another human being ever after the betrayal it endured. However, few are ever so lucky. Meanwhile, for the owner, the chicken's death comes as no surprise. It is a routine event, and therefore no black swan. The idea of a black swan is therefore relative to the knowledge one possesses. Hence, our objective is to try and be in the position of the butcher, not the butchered. Taleb says, "I worry less about advertised and sensational risks, more about the vicious, hidden ones." Of course, the idea of a black swan also incorporates good things, such as wildly unlikely positive outcomes of chance, otherwise known as life. The odds of being born are 1 in 400 trillion. But to be fair, I just unfollowed my own advice. Such a thing can't really be predicted, can it? For all we know, and for all we don't, being born is an unimaginably unlikely event that nobody really predicted. So if you are alive, whatever that means, in the end, we're actually all the black swans we've been trying to avoid the entire time. Ironic, isn't it? In the year 1925, Einstein shared with a student his burning desire to understand the universe. "I want to know how God created this world," he said as they strolled along. "I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are just details." This one conversation expresses the core of Einstein's guiding principle, one that has driven humanity to inquire, discover, experiment, and most importantly, learn about this universe we call home. But what was Einstein really talking about? And can human knowledge ever reach a point where we understand everything? Since the discovery of the world of quantum mechanics in the early 20th century, scientists have been racking their brain trying to understand how it works. Even a century later, we're still not sure how and why subatomic particles behave the way they do. But that's just half the problem. The discovery of quantum theory posed a more serious issue that Einstein, Stephen Hawking, and other world-renowned physicists have been working tirelessly to solve. That challenge can be summarized in one word: unification. You see, modern physics is split into two pillars: classical physics, the physics of Newton, Einstein, and Galileo, which predicts gravity and describes the motion of massive things in our cosmos like stars and planets, and quantum physics, which governs the world of subatomic particles according to its own set of laws and rules. Both pillars describe their respective worlds accurately, but fail when applied to each other's subject matter. Einstein's preoccupation was that there must be a way that these two worlds could reconcile. There has to be a theory that unifies the world of the subatomic with the world of the massive. A theory that can predict, well, everything. Now you might be thinking, so why should we care? Well, a unified theory that can bridge both of these worlds could potentially unlock many of our universe's secrets and answer some of the deepest philosophical and theological questions that we've been asking since the days of Galileo. What are we truly made of? What happened before the Big Bang? Are we living in a multiverse? The unified theory, or the theory of everything, might just have the answers to all of these questions. The universe and everything in it is glued together by 4 fundamental forces. I made an entire video on these 4 forces, so if you really want to fully understand all of them, I suggest you check it out. But for the sake of this video, here is the gist of what they do. Big objects like stars, planets, humans, and cats are all governed by the force of gravity, and thanks to Einstein and his general theory of relativity, we now know that gravity isn't a force that magically pulls objects together. Instead, it's the curving and warping of the fabric of our universe, space-time. While all these big objects are governed by just one fundamental force, subatomic particles, on the other hand, are governed by 3 fundamental forces, as if they weren't already confusing enough. These 3 fundamental forces are electromagnetic, weak nuclear, and strong nuclear. Electromagnetism holds atoms together, the strong force holds nuclei together, and the weak force is responsible for some type of nuclear decay. These particles, along with their respective forces, make up what we call the Standard Model. The Standard Model describes the world of the very small. We know that everything in the universe is made of subatomic particles, from planets and stars to humans and dogs. We know that all of these things are made of atoms, and atoms are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. In the 1960s, we discovered that even protons and neutrons are made of even smaller particles called quarks, and electrons from leptons. Using different combinations of these particles and their respective forces, we can build atoms, molecules, humans, planets, and even stars. So it seems that the Standard Model is a comprehensive interpretation of our universe. But it doesn't include everything. The truth is, finding the smallest subatomic particles is only the first step to getting to a theory of everything. The second step would be finding a place for gravity in this model. There are 2 reasons why gravity isn't included. The first is that when it comes to small particles, the force of gravity is so weak that it doesn't have any effect on a quantum system. The second reason is that we don't really know how to incorporate general relativity, which describes the motion of large objects, into the world of quantum that governs subatomic particles. Many great minds, including Einstein, tried tirelessly. It's said that even on his deathbed, Einstein revisited his notes on the theory of everything and tried one last time to find an elegant solution to explain the fundamental differences between the world of the small and that of the large. But unfortunately, he ran out of time. So that's that, right? While we still haven't found a theory that can explain everything, we have made significant progress, and maybe the most groundbreaking was that of another brilliant mind, Stephen Hawking. In 2014, a movie was made on the impactful life
came from.
Let's go! Who's up next? Enemy mark! Come on, come on!
Really?
I'm not done with you. You do better than that. Oh, look what I found. Incoming smoke! Friendly fire! So good I should charge this'll work. Enemy mark! Who's next? Now we're
Nailed that one.
Let's just leave it alone. Lay down!
I will not be merciful.
Oh yeah! Knock that shit off! On to the next! You deserve it! Just what I need! Drag out!
Incoming smoke. Shock out! Get over here!
I'll take this. Incoming smoke! Time to tear shit up!
Beautiful thing. Incoming frag.
What's the matter? Not feeling good? Who's next?
Can always use more.
Got him. Smoke out!
Enemy targeted.
Good night. Come on! Try next time!
Now the fun begins.
Get me more ammunition!
I saw target. Smoke out!
Don't worry, I got it. No!
Putting down a nade! Come on, you want some of this?
Got one.
Sweet. Throwing smoke!
Enemy spotted.
Use a second!
Down this weapon!
Contact.
on your feet! You're not so tough. Eyes on target. Throwing frag! Frag out! Oh, you done. Eyes on target.
Enemy spotted! Smoke out! Smoke out! Smoke out! Enemy mark! You're not so tough.
I'm down!
Target my mark!
On to the next!
hell did that thing?
Smoke out!
Going slow!
Smartest mistake!
Oh yeah! Hostile!
Take out my knees!
Hold up. I'm not done yet.
I'm looking for this. Finders keepers.
You want me to shoot you?
Now we're having fun.
Going fast! What's in there?
Throwing smoke. Smoke out. Would you get the fuck out of my way, please? Smoke out! Throwing smoke. Next. Smoke out. Throwing smoke. Get out. Wow. Just what I need. I'll take this. Smoke out!
Fine.
Throwing smoke. You're my hero! Throwing smoke!
What's wrong with this thing? That's not my fault.
I'll take that.
of Stephen Hawking. As a result, Hawking became one of the most revered physicists in the world, and one of the most admired by pop culture. Away from the limelight, however, Hawking, like Einstein, had an obsessive yearning to understand the universe and never ceased to challenge our knowledge of it. One of his greatest contributions was the discovery of what is now known as Hawking radiation. In 1974, Hawking discovered one of the biggest breakthroughs of the 20th century, a groundbreaking interpretation of black holes, as well as an unprecedented interaction between the world of quantum and gravity. Hawking's discovery was so ingenious that it gave us hope that the theory of everything, the holy grail of physics, is still a human possibility. Black holes are densely packed regions of space where the gravitational pull is so strong that nothing can escape, not even light. Einstein predicted the presence of black holes through his general theory of relativity in 1916, and we confirmed his predictions in 1974 when we observed our first black hole in the Milky Way. In the same year, Hawking discovered that black holes are like a vitamin tablet placed in water. They can dissipate in time and release energy. This is what we know as Hawking radiation today. But how can energy escape a black hole when nothing else can? Hawking used a quantum understanding to explain this. When we think of space, we imagine large, cold, empty places, but in reality, space is alive with the active creation and destruction of energy at the subatomic stage. Particles are created in pairs, matter and antimatter, and they are constantly created and destroyed in a concept known as annihilation. Hawking imagined a pair of particles created very close to the event horizon of a black hole. This is the boundary around a black hole from which nothing can escape. He then showed that these particles don't need to annihilate each other, since one of them can be sucked into the black hole. If the black hole is receiving negative energy, then it has to release energy in order for the law of conservation of energy to hold. Hawking also proved that black holes lose mass with time, and they don't last forever. But more importantly, he was able to arrive at this discovery by merging a quantum principle with the concept of gravity. This is by far the closest we've come to a theory of everything, a unified field theory, or quantum gravity. But as with most things in science, the fact that we haven't found that one elegant equation does not mean that we have failed. In fact, maybe the real treasure was the discoveries we made along the way, many of which have paved the way for a brighter future for humankind. String theory is one of the most prominent ones. It suggests that subatomic particles such as electrons and quarks are made of tiny vibrating strings or filaments that twist and fold, creating everything in our universe. Just like the strings of a violin, they can vibrate in various patterns, creating different kinds of particles, including the graviton, a hypothetical particle that, according to quantum mechanics, should carry the force of gravity. On paper, string theory could unite gravity and quantum mechanics under one framework once and for all. The theory was popularized in the 60s and 70s, and its mathematics predicts small bundled up extra dimensions that give rise to a network of universes, or a multiverse. While this theory is prominent, it's highly untestable, even with access to the latest technology. String theory, though, is only the beginning. After almost 2 decades of tireless research, we've discovered the Higgs boson. This proved that electrons and quarks inside the atom get their mass from an invisible field that spreads throughout space. The discovery took an effort from a group of 3,000 scientists that dedicated endless hours to the cause that would surely bring our species one step closer to understanding our universe. We've also discovered that all the atoms and light in the universe only make up less than 5% of the total content of the cosmos. The remaining 95% is composed of dark matter and dark energy, which are invisible, but whose effects dominate the evolution of our universe. Dark matter provides the gravitational pull that keeps galaxies together, while dark energy is responsible for the ever-accelerating expansion of our universe. For thousands of years, we've looked to the heavens and wondered what mysteries are hiding beyond the clouds. Since 1970, there have been more than 90 telescopes placed in orbit by NASA and the ESA to bring the universe closer to us. And with the James Webb Telescope that launched on December 25, 2021, we entered a new era of discovery. This telescope is the largest and most powerful one ever built, and its daunting task is to find the first galaxies that formed in the early universe, and peer through dusty clouds to see stars form planetary systems. We may not have found the theory that unites quantum with gravity yet, but every discovery brings us one step closer to that ultimate goal of unification. Throughout our time on this planet, we've pushed the boundaries of existence by asking tough questions and working tirelessly to find the answers. Our species has been defined by its incessant thirst for knowledge and unwavering hope in a unified universe. 350 years have elapsed since our first big successful step in this journey, when Newton unified the heavens with the earth, revealing that planets, stars, and apples are guided by the same set of laws. 200 years later, James Clerk Maxwell coupled electricity with magnetism, and then Einstein linked space and time and warped them into one fabric that we now know as space-time. Looking at the timeline of these events, it shouldn't be surprising that the road ahead could be much longer. Einstein died dreaming of a physical world governed by one set of laws, a unified framework that can unlock the mysteries of our universe, and Hawking never ceased to look up at the stars and wonder what mysteries lie ahead waiting to be found. Whether the theory of everything is a realistic quest or a delusional attempt to make sense of the absurdity of the universe, one thing is certain. Our unwavering hope in the search for unification will only lead to humanity's advancement as a species. If you feel you're in a black hole, don't give up. There's a way out. If a tree falls down in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? How do you know? Taking it one step further, if you hear the tree hit the ground but don't see it, why do you trust your sense of hearing? This might seem like a ridiculous question, but the truth is that despite our total reliance on them, our senses deceive us all the time. You hear this audio and some of us hear Yanny while the others hear Laurel. You think you hear your friend laughing in the other room, only to come out and see it's just the TV. A stick that looks bent in the water turns out to be straight when you pull it out. You spend what seems like hours walking through a dark and creepy forest, but then wake up and realize you were just dreaming. The world is a strange place, and for all the knowledge we've managed to gather as a species, there's still a lot more that we don't. Here is everything we don't know, too. I think, therefore I am. You've likely heard this phrase before. Coined by 17th century French philosopher René Descartes, the simple declaration serves as the foundation of all modern philosophy. It's a statement of knowledge, an assertion that if I know nothing else, I at least know I exist. While this may not seem like a revolutionary idea at first glance, it's actually quite significant. Philosophers since the time of Socrates have wondered whether or not it's possible to know anything, because it always seems that the more questions we ask, the fewer answers we're left with. Descartes himself was renowned for his astonishing ability to doubt everything, no matter how trivial, no matter how seemingly obvious. He treated all of his ideas with a radical level of skepticism, believing that doing so would eventually lead him to the truth. This skepticism led him to ask a question that science still hasn't been able to answer. How do I know I'm not dreaming right now? Or, even more frightening, how do I know that my mind isn't being deliberately misled by some evil genius? Think of it like the movie The Matrix. It's possible that, at this very moment, you're hooked up to a giant machine that is feeding you all the sensory data you're currently experiencing. You aren't really watching this video, it's just the machine making you think that you are. While unlikely, technically it is possible, and there's no way we can disprove it. This is why some people argue that we live in a simulation. Do we or don't we? We just don't know. Descartes argues that our inability to rule out this scenario forces us to doubt everything we think we know, a state of radical skepticism in which we can't trust anything we experience or think. Fortunately, Descartes offers us a way out. Even if we are forced to doubt everything, the one thing we cannot doubt is the fact that we're doubting. If we can doubt, then we can think, and if we can think, then there must be a mind doing the thinking. So while we may never know whether or not the world around us is an illusion, or if we even have physical bodies, we can rest easy in the knowledge that we have minds, that we exist, right? Well, not so much. Later philosophers from Kierkegaard to Heidegger criticized Descartes' claim, arguing that the existence of thoughts does not necessarily imply the existence of a thinker. Friedrich Nietzsche even went so far as to say that the idea that there is something called thinking is itself an assumption. All we can really say then is that something is happening. What that thing is, we just don't know. If you're rolling your eyes at this point, it's understandable. To most people, this all sounds like a bunch of over-intellectualized nonsense with no bearing on the actual world. Even if we do live in the Matrix, I still know that 2 + 2 = 4, that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, and that the earth beneath my feet is solid. Well, hold up on the last point. Part of the reason why it's so difficult to say whether we truly know anything is because we live in a dynamic universe where nothing is ever stable. Everything in existence is always moving and always changing, including the Earth itself. Even as you watch this video, the very face of the planet is evolving. Plate tectonic theory is a relative newcomer to science. First pioneered in the 1960s, our understanding of how the Earth shifts and moves is still fairly limited. We've discovered certain things, like the fact that the Earth's rocky crust is in the form of plates that sits on top of a mantle of liquid magma. As this magma circulates and churns, it pushes the plates around, knocking them into each other and creating earthquakes, volcanoes, and mountains. What this means is that, contrary to what we think, the ground beneath our feet isn't solid. It's constantly changing, and if it is, how can we say we know it? Tomorrow an earthquake could reshape our continents, and so the best we can ever have is a rough approximation of what we think it used to be, not what it actually is. Maybe I'm just trying to strong-arm a metaphor here, but it seems like whenever we investigate what we think we know, our ideas start to crumble. It's an interesting quirk of reality, really. The simpler a question is, the harder it can be to answer. It's for this reason that many people fear death, because we simply don't know anything about what happens after it. Yet I cannot help but think that the fear that we don't know anything about death presupposes that we know what life is, because in reality, we don't know either. While it's easy for us to tell the difference between living and non-living materials, say like an apple versus a rock, but when we try to pin down a precise definition of life, things get complicated. All life forms, whether a plant or animal, bacteria or fungus, are composed of cells and are able to meet certain basic fundamental conditions. These include responsiveness, metabolism, energy transformation, growth, and reproduction. For instance, when you smell food, you respond by feeling hungry. Eating a sandwich then starts your metabolic process, which allows you to convert calories into energy. This energy is then used to do things like grow muscles or attract a mate. But this is what life does, not what life is. The main problem is that the primary feature of life is that it's always changing, and definitions by their nature are meant to be static. Perhaps if we knew where life came from, we'd have a better sense of what exactly it is. Unfortunately, we don't know this either. Of course, one day science will figure this stuff out, the secrets to life, the Earth, and everything else will be unlocked. All it takes is more advanced technology, more sophisticated methods, and we'll be able to know the answers for certain, won't we? Here's the thing though, science isn't ever 100% certain. When researchers at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, otherwise known as CERN, announced the discovery of the Higgs boson in 2012, they did so by stating that their observations had passed the crucial threshold of 5 sigma certainty. To most people, this term is nothing more than academic jargon, but sigma in this context is the statistical unit of measurement used to determine how probable it is that a given result is correct. The higher the value, the more likely a particular finding is true, with 5 sigma being the gold standard, representing a 1 in a million chance that a given observation is inaccurate. Though, there's still a chance. You may think I'm splitting hairs here. After all, 1 in a million is as good as true, isn't it? Well, no. A 2011 experiment conducted by CERN reportedly found that a series of nearly massless ghost particles, called neutrinos, had traveled faster than the speed of light. This was, of course, impossible, as the finding violated Einstein's principle of relativity, yet the experiment passed with a 6 sigma confidence, meaning that it had a staggering 1.5 billion chance of being false. And yet it was. 4 later experiments all failed to replicate the original results, and the first experiment was written off as a fluke. Science is very good at explaining what is happening and how it happens, but not really why it's happening. Pass any scientific revelation through a series of why questions, and you'll always get to a point where we just don't know. Take gravity, for instance. When an apple falls from a tree and hits Isaac Newton on his head, we know it's gravity. We can even measure it as 9.8 meters per second. But when it comes to explaining why this happens, almost 350 years later, we're still clueless. Every other physical force in the universe, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear force, has a corresponding subatomic particle. Yet we still don't know what the particle responsible for gravity is. Physicists have theorized the existence of something called a graviton that, similar to the Higgs boson, requires massive amounts of energy to detect. In fact, it's predicted that it would take a mass spectrometer the size of Jupiter, operating at 100% capacity, to identify one. But why is a graviton so hard to find? Why is it that physics behaves like this, and is it possible that it could work differently? The notion of alternate physics is most commonly associated with the multiverse theory, the idea that there isn't a single universe but an infinite array of different universes. We don't know if this is true, of course, but if it is, then it's possible that among these countless variations, there exists other types of physics. Maybe in another universe, gravity isn't so difficult to measure. Maybe instead, electromagnetism is the rogue force confounding their scientists. But it isn't just other universes that may operate under alternative sets of physical laws. Even our own universe may be subject to alternate forms of physics that we've yet to discover. In 2022, researchers at Columbia University programmed an AI to study video footage of different physical phenomena and then search for the minimal set of variables that described its observations. The footage included things like a pendulum, a lava lamp, and a fireplace. When the AI returned its results, the researchers found that they could identify some of the variables that the artificial intelligence had defined, but not others. The belief is that the AI was applying novel sets of physical laws currently unknown to humans. Unfortunately, since the program can't communicate what it's thinking, the exact variables remain a mystery. However, it does raise an interesting question. If we were to meet an alien species, is it possible that they might use alternate laws of physics? Ted Chiang's novella, Story of Your Life, the inspiration for the 2016 film Arrival, explores this idea. Fair warning, there's spoilers ahead. In the story, humans make first contact with aliens after dozens of spaceships suddenly appear in orbit, but rather than wanting to take over the planet, it seems that the extraterrestrial visitors just want to talk. To get the conversation going, both humans and the aliens work together to slowly decipher one another's language, as well as their respective approaches to physics. It quickly becomes apparent that the scientific and mathematical concepts that are advanced to us, like calculus, are elementary to them. Surprisingly though, the reverse is also true. The aliens deploy strange, seemingly convoluted methods to describe basic principles like velocity. While both methods provide accurate results, each is highly specific to the species that developed them. Eventually, it's explained that the aliens don't perceive our universe as causal. Instead, they witness all events as happening simultaneously. This accounts for their weird set of physics. Chiang's Story of Your Life raises interesting questions surrounding concepts like time, perception, free will, and subjectivity, forcing its readers to wonder if there's such a thing as objective reality. How do we know that the reality we experience is independent of our own consciousness? This problem has plagued philosophers since antiquity. Plato, in particular, is known for having proposed the idea of the realm of forms, a non-physical, immaterial plane from which the physical world manifests. Science actually functions on a similar principle, assuming that there is an objective reality that exists beyond our senses, which can be observed and measured. Despite our best efforts, though, no one has ever confirmed the existence of an objective reality. In fact, given that everything we know has to come first to us through our senses and therefore our own subjective perception, it's impossible to prove an objective reality. We'll just never know. In his book, The Spell of the Sensuous, philosopher David Abram argues that the very idea of an objective reality isn't representative of the universe we live in. In actuality, Abram says we exist in the realm of inner subjectivity, a term he borrows from the German philosopher Edmund Husserl. This form of reality, rather than being a separate and isolated phenomenon, is created by the collective experience of all its participants. The universe doesn't exist as an object of our subjective perceptions. Instead, it arises out of our very interaction with it. If this idea sounds a little out there, consider quantum mechanics, where our mere observations literally affect the state of matter. Just by measuring a photon of light, we're able to change it from a wave to a particle. So maybe there's no such thing as objective reality. Maybe all that exists is our collective, intersubjective experience. There's simply no way of knowing. Plunging into the depths of uncertainty is never pleasant. That's why humans came up with reason and science in the first place. We want to feel as though we know things. It gives us a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous universe. For the majority of my life, I was agnostic about most things. If there wasn't what I deemed to be rational, scientific proof to support an idea, I just didn't believe it. But the more I learn, the more I realize how limited my own experience is, and just how much we as a species don't know. Ordinary matter accounts for just 5% of the entire universe. The rest of it, 95% of everything that exists, is a complete and total mystery. We just don't know. It seems naive, if not outright arrogant, to close myself off to new ideas just because they don't fit within my current understanding of how things work. Tomorrow the Earth could shift, life as we know it could completely change, and everything that science has taught us could turn out to just be a fluke. But rather than meeting this dilemma with fear or outright projection of scientific principles, we should take it as an opportunity to learn, embracing uncertainty as a means of transforming our perception. To me, this seems like the only rational path forward. Because as it turns out, everything we don't know is, well, everything. We've all experienced it. You're sitting around at the table for a family dinner. Across the table from you is that cousin you haven't seen since the last family get-together. In the most confident fashion, he opens his mouth and starts talking passionately on a subject he clearly knows very little about. You look down at your phone, and in one quick Google search, you find out everything he's saying is completely wrong. But he doesn't seem to know it. Everyone else at the table doesn't seem to know it either. His confidence is so strong and unwavering that you start to wonder, does this guy know how wrong he really is? This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who know very little about a subject tend to overestimate how much they know because they just don't know how much they don't know. As a result, the people who are most confident in their ability are not usually the ones who should be. The term Dunning-Kruger is named after the two scientists who first discovered this psychological phenomenon, David Dunning and Justin Kruger. In 1999, they carried out research titled Unskilled and Unaware of It, where they tested a group of people on grammar, humor, and logic. In the first experiment, the 65 participants were asked to rate jokes they thought people would find funny. The people who personally felt they were excellent judges of humor were the ones who did the worst on the test. Dunning and Kruger then put the same participants through varying degrees of grammar and logic tests, and the results always came out the same. For the most part, the people who scored the least were the most confident going into the test, and overestimated how well they did afterwards, while those who scored the most overestimated how well everyone else did. Now you might think, how does this really happen? Surely you should just know when you fail a test, right? You have that gut feeling, and after all, you're the one who wrote it yourself. But that only happens when you know nothing about the subject at all. When we learn just a little bit about that subject, we start overestimating how much we actually know. We are aware that we know about the subject, however, we don't know enough to know that there is still so much more to learn. We are not yet skilled enough to accurately assess our knowledge and abilities, so we think we know much more than we actually do. Imagine you're given a test about the culture of extraterrestrial life. You've just watched a 30-minute YouTube documentary, and you're feeling pretty good about your knowledge of things that haven't been proven to exist. But apart from this documentary, you haven't done any other research about extraterrestrial life. You haven't been to space, and you certainly don't have any alien friends. You're handed the test, and in it, you're asked to answer 20 questions about life as an extraterrestrial. I know what you're thinking. You're not entirely ignorant. You just watched a 30-minute documentary about aliens, so you'll certainly ace this test. Or at least do better than the average. Right. Well, that is the Dunning-Kruger effect at work. Because the truth is, just one documentary is not nearly enough. You've only just discovered the tip of the iceberg, but because you don't know how big the ice under the water is, you'll keep living in the illusion that you've explored all of it. And we see this every day. From your cousin sitting across the room to that one coworker that gets really annoyed when someone else gets the promotion they feel they so desperately deserve. Performance reports at work give us an unbiased view on how well we've done. However, when people who truly don't know all that much get these results, they aren't satisfied with it. because in their minds, they've done a lot better than what the report says, so they make up excuses like, the boss didn't like me, or look down on the coworker that got the promotion over them, not stopping for once to think that maybe they still have a lot to learn. All the engineers in a company were once asked to rate their work and determine how well they were doing compared with the rest of their colleagues. 42% of the engineers believed that they were among the top 5% in the company. In another scenario, professors were asked whether they did average, below average, or above average work. 94% of all the professors in the survey believed that they do above average work, a figure that defies mathematical plausibility. You would think that professors who are always grading people would be able to come up with a more accurate self-assessment. But the reality is, we are all victims of the Dunning-Kruger effect, both as professor and student. Some scientists argue that the Dunning-Kruger effect might not be because of poor self-assessment, but rather just the poor performers wanting to paint a fluffed-up report of their performance. And while you can get where this argument is coming from, it doesn't make sense, because there are a lot of places where we observe the Dunning-Kruger effect even when there's no reason for the person to want to look good. The truth is, we can't give an accurate judgment of skills we know only very little about, because we simply don't know what is good and what is not. We haven't seen both ends of the spectrum. Metacognition is the awareness of your own thought processes. It's being able to plan, monitor, and access your own performance and understanding. It's like your brain's way of grading itself. In their research, Dunning and Kruger discovered that the less people know about a subject, the lesser their metacognitive ability around that subject. This is what makes them unaware of their own incompetence. And this is a very strange thing, because it means that oftentimes, the loudest person in the room is usually the one who knows the least. Bertrand Russell said this in 1951, and it still rings true today, even now more than ever. Because although he thought it was just a thing of his time, it wasn't. It was simply the Dunning-Kruger effect at work. The sad thing is that people who know the least are also the people who are least likely to take up a learning opportunity. Think about the 42% of engineers who believe that they were in the top 5%. They'll most likely ignore any opportunities to learn from their colleagues, because they already believe that they're the best. On the other hand, the people who are the best don't realize that they're so special, so they don't try to teach others, even when they're the ones that should be doing that. In the end, the company remains stagnant. Life is very much like this company. Go on the internet today, and the loudest voices are the ones who know the least. Everywhere you turn, there's a fake guru trying to teach you how to become a billionaire overnight. They have very little knowledge, but that doesn't stop them from selling $1,000 courses with the same basic information that you can get just by Googling the right things. The sad thing is that most people buy into their confidence and certainty only to realize too late that it was all bravado and no substance. Now more than ever, misinformation is a bigger problem than ignorance. People briefly glance through a topic and they instantly want to start teaching others. They don't take their time to actually read past the first page of the instruction manual before screaming at the rooftops about how much they know. Or how much they think they know. So, more often than not, we're listening to the most confident people and not the most reputable. We accept information from the person who speaks the loudest, rather than the person who is the most knowledgeable. From 5G death scares to anti-vax campaigns, people are constantly satisfied with knowing the bare minimum. Not only are they satisfied, they are confident that they know it all, and they waste no time in sharing that information with others. If the loudest voices are ignorant, why aren't the knowledgeable speaking up? Again, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. When the 65 participants were given the 3 tests by Dunning and Kruger, the people who scored the best often knew they did pretty well in the test. However, they felt everyone else did too. They overestimated the scores of the other people in the test and didn't think anything special of their own results. When asked to place themselves in a percentile, more often than not, the people who did the best placed themselves lower than they actually were. Because of this, the people who have any imagination and understanding are filled with doubt and indecision. The people who are most knowledgeable don't realize that they are, so they find it difficult to speak up. It's easy for us to think that because something comes so easily and naturally to us, it does to others as well. It's easy to think that we're not special and that everyone can do as well as we've done. But in reality, that's not true. In fact, if you think your work is not good enough, then it's already probably better than most. Because unlike the people at the bottom of the percentile, you know what you don't know, so you are more willing to improve. The Dunning-Kruger effect is not entirely a bad thing. In fact, it's the reason most of us can take a leap of faith. I started this channel without knowing how difficult running a YouTube channel is, how badly an algorithm can beat you down, how the numbers on the screen affect the value you place on your work. I didn't know all of that at first. All I knew was to make a video and upload it. I feel like if I had known how difficult it would be in the long run, I might have never even started. So, in a way, the Dunning-Kruger effect helps us to make the first move without worrying too much about everything we don't know yet. It gives us the confidence to start. Once we take that first step, though, it's up to us to not get comfortable and confident in the little that we know. We must fight the cognitive biases and realize that we've only scratched the surface and there's still a long way to go. We're often taught not to compare ourselves with others, and most of the time, that's excellent advice. Constantly pitting yourself against others can leave you unhappy and unmotivated. But the truth is, comparison isn't always a bad thing. When we compare ourselves with others, we're able to better assess how well we're doing. Think about the participants of Dunning and Kruger's experiment. If the people who had scored the lowest were shown the scores of all the participants afterward, they would have been able to understand that they weren't as knowledgeable as they thought they were. If you're very confident about how much you know, pause for a minute. Take your time before sharing that information with others. Question your long-standing views and opinions, because there might just be new information that has come to light to disprove what you hold so dearly to your heart. Be open to feedback and criticism. While it's true that people shouldn't discourage your dreams, you need to understand that sometimes you may be overestimating your skills. So take the criticism and consider it carefully. If you do, you're most likely going to learn a thing or two that you didn't already know. When you're fully aware of the metacognitive bias that is the Dunning-Kruger effect, you'll know when to ask for objective criticism and feedback, and when to trust your own abilities and realize that you might just be special after all. Don't be satisfied with the little knowledge you have. Keep improving. Continue learning. Always ask questions, and be curious. Your curiosity will be rewarded, whether you realize it or not. I made my first video on this channel in July 2017, after months of going back and forth on whether or not I actually wanted to create a YouTube channel. What would people think? What if people hate the videos and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about? Who am I to talk about these topics? These were the thoughts that flooded my head. If you've ever been in a situation where you have to start something or give a presentation in front of a group of people, then I'm sure you've had a similar emotion. It's the fear of being judged, the fear that keeps us in chains and holds us bound from achieving our true potential. To understand why we care so much about what others think about us, we have to go back to the beginning of human history. Man, like many other animals, evolved to be social. Our survival was dependent on close-knit communities, tribes, and clans. We would hunt together, make shelter, and protect one another from predators should they dare strike. Being together made us thrive. So, at the time, being cast out of the clan almost always meant death. Without the technologies we have today, making shelter, hunting, and protecting yourself from wildlife was almost impossible for one person to do alone. Sadly, even now that our society has evolved to a point where we no longer have to worry about predators, and we have the tools and resources to provide food, clothing, and shelter for ourselves, the need to be part of a group still has been maladapted to our current reality. Then we were scared of being left out in the cold. Today we're scared of getting cancelled on Twitter because of something we said, or getting insulted for repeating clothes on Instagram, or getting hate comments on your YouTube video of people telling you your voice is becoming redundant and boring. You see, this feeling of being ostracized has worsened woefully because of social media. By creating likes and dislikes, we brought to light this need to feel validated and seen. In an instant, you can see just how many people support you, and that number can be addicting. It gets to the point where we stop saying what we really want to say, and instead start saying the things we know will get us the most likes. Before you know it, you're posting certain thoughts, photos, and writing specific statements to get that attention and validation from others. How many times have you seen your favorite influencers and creators online suddenly sell out, where it feels like they're no longer authentic, only doing or saying the things they know will please the algorithm? I made a video about Unit 731 and the despicable things the Japanese government did in the Second World War. However, because it was not advertiser-friendly content, according to YouTube, the video didn't perform extremely well, and that's fine. This is the kind of ostracization and social conditioning that makes people fall in line and stop saying anything that might offend the people with money. It's like they tell you there's freedom of speech, but only when your microphone is turned off. Growing up, I always felt different. Of course, I had friends and wanted to be part of the social group, but I had questions about the universe that people just didn't like to discuss. Who wants to talk about death and the afterlife on the school playground after all? Because of that, I felt different from everyone else, like a piece of a puzzle, but from another set. And so I grew up worried that everyone would look at me as weird and different. So I tried my best to hide my existential dread to fit in like everyone else. If you're watching this video right now, there's a high chance that you were also once a kid like me who was so worried about being disliked that you shield the real you just so you wouldn't be thought of as different. If you're still in that position, listen. Stop caring so much about what other people think and start living your life authentically. Yes, caring what others think is healthy. However, it becomes hurtful when we try to change ourselves just to be liked by others. You would enjoy your time on this floating rock far more if you choose to live your authentic self. And if someone rejects you because of it, you'll know that they were never meant for you in the first place. Now, if that sounds like a lofty dream and not really grounded in reality, I understand. Because the sad truth of this entire thing is that we do need to be judged fairly by others. At its core, that's what makes our society work. We agree that something is law, and whoever breaks it gets judged. We agree on certain moral principles, and whoever breaks them gets socially ostracized. We're judged at our places of work, in school, in our society as a whole. As sad as it sounds, gossip and ostracism help the greater good of the group. In 2014, Stanford professor Rob Willer led a study that explored the relation of gossip and ostracism to the harmony and functionality of experimental groups. In this study, Rob found out that groups that allowed their members to gossip and vote out underperforming members were able to sustain cooperation and prevent selfishness much better than groups that weren't allowed to do so. When we think of ostracism, we almost always see it in a bad light. However, this study proved that it does have a much more important role in preventing the weak and vulnerable from being bullied and ridden upon. Have you ever been in a group for a school project, only to quickly realize that there's one person who just wouldn't do anything because they know the group will pick up their slack? How's that make you feel? Now imagine you could remove these people from the group and then gossip to other groups about how bad of a team player they are. It might seem harsh at first, but because of our innate fear of being ostracized, more often than not, these people would see the reality of what they're doing, and actually act better when reinvited into the group. It also prevents these selfish people from exploiting the more vulnerable people in the group, and allows them to reach their full potential without fear of being taken advantage of. The researchers concluded that exclusion compelled participants to conform to the more cooperative behavior of the rest of the group. So yes, we need to be good team players for the proper functioning of society. However, being part of a group should never be at the expense of our own individuality. We should never get so scared of being ostracized that we do not say the things that matter to us for the fear of being judged. We need to realize that we will get to a point in our lives where we'll begin to assess everything that we've been taught as children. When you start to outgrow old beliefs and walk into new ones, do not be held back by the fear of what everyone who you grew up with would think. Caring about what other people think is necessary for the proper functioning of society. But when caring what other people think affects our abilities to make decisions for ourselves, that's when you need to pause and reconsider. You're a person with their own thoughts, ideas, dreams, and goals. Don't let the fear of being disliked hold you back from expressing that. You want to drop out of school to become a comedian? What would people think? You want to start a YouTube channel? What would people think? You want to be with someone from a different culture or religion? What would people think? This one question holds so many people back from doing what they love. It's like a chain that binds our neck and leaves us no room to breathe. We're like circus elephants, held back by a rope that might only exist in our imagination. Ultimate freedom is having the courage to be disliked. The boldness to stand firm in what you believe in, even when the crowd is saying something else. The courage to stand when everyone else is sitting, and run when everyone else is standing. The courage to be your authentic self, regardless of what everyone around you tells you to be instead. Developing the courage to be disliked is not easy. Remember that it's in our nature to care what other people think. So to stray from that even minutely would mean going against our very own biology, and that's never very easy. But the good news is that we can actually do it. The first and most important thing to realize is that everyone, just like you, is worried about their own insecurities. When we go out into the world, we're often so consumed with our own insecurities that we feel like everyone else is thinking about us and condemning us. But the reality is, more often than not, just like you, people are so worried about themselves that they aren't really thinking about anyone else. And when they do speak out against us, they're often projecting their insecurities on us, trying to bring us down to feel better about themselves. Don't let them do that. The difference between ostracization in early humans and what we have today is that with the early humans, it was only your closest relatives and members of your clan that could cast you out. However, today, because of social media, anyone and everyone can have an opinion about us. Share that opinion, and we're forced to take notice of it. The problem with this is that we're taking criticism from people we wouldn't take advice from. Think about it. If you wouldn't let this stranger into your house for fear of invading your privacy, why would you let them into your head, the most private place of all? Sometimes the people judging you and not letting you live your true potential aren't strangers. They're childhood friends and relatives. When that's the case, we need to remind ourselves that the consequences of living outside the group is not as sinister as it used to be. You have the tools and resources to thrive away from your primary group. And in fact, you can find another group to join, one that would accept you for who you are, and not try to force you into being something you're not. I know I've said some negative things about social media in this video and many others, but there are some positives as well. In this scenario where you no longer feel part of the group you were born into or grew up in, the internet offers you a community of people who are willing to accept you from all over the world. You just have to take the time to find them. Lao Tzu wrote in Tao Te Ching, "Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner." The courage to be disliked is the key that opens the prison doors and sets you free to be the person you've always wanted to be. You look out the window into the empty streets. No sounds of kids running around, no noise of busy streets littered with both cars and pedestrians. The city is silent. The pigeons don't even group up anymore, because there's no one to feed them. You ask yourself, where am I? Your alarm rings. It's 9 a.m. Time to resume work at the office for the day. With a sad face, you walk to your desk, open up your computer, and sigh. I miss the old days, you say to yourself. This is nostalgia. It's the burning desire to go back to the past, to live the life we once had, or perhaps only a romanticized version of it. We want experiences, places, things, people, and even ourselves to go back to being what they once were. We remember our childhood memories without all the awkwardness, our first love without the reason we're no longer with them, our first kiss without the terrible acne we had. We remember a romanticized version of our past, one without the flaws, one where we know what's going to happen next, and one where we can tell what consequences our actions will have before we take them. It often happens when we see, hear, or even smell something that reminds us of the past and the life we once had. The best example of this is in relationships. People often leave relationships because it wasn't a good experience for them. But a few months down the line, and they begin to start missing the connection. They feel like maybe it wasn't as bad as they remember. Their memories begin to filter out all the bad that happened, and they're left with feelings of a nostalgia about a romanticized version of what the relationship was. Oftentimes, they go back, only to get hurt all over again. Nostalgia can be pleasant, but as we've seen, it can also often cause us a lot of emotional distress. The 17th century Swiss physician Johannes Hofer, who came up with this name, classified nostalgia as a mental disorder. No one could understand why anyone would want to dwell in the past without that being the case. And for a long time, that's what nostalgia was, until one lunch in 1999 in Southampton, England. Konstantin Sedekidis had just recently moved to the University of Southampton and was having lunch with a colleague. He explained to this colleague that he was generally doing well, but a few times a week, he was hit with nostalgia of his former home at the University of North Carolina. He longed for the time with his friends, the basketball games. He longed for his old life. His colleague, who was a clinical psychologist, made an immediate diagnosis. Depression, he said. Just like the 17th century Swiss physician, this psychologist couldn't fathom why anyone would want a time that was already gone, a life they had already lived. But he knew this wasn't true. Konstantin denied being depressed, explaining to his colleague that he didn't feel any pain. He said, "I told him I did live my life forward, but sometimes I couldn't help thinking about the past. And it was rewarding. Nostalgia made me feel that my life had roots and continuity. It made me feel good about myself and my relationships. It provided a texture to my life and gave me strength to move forward. And this was the start of a drastic change. Everything we knew about nostalgia was about to take on a new form. Perhaps it wasn't as bad as we thought. It might not even be bad at all." Through Konstantin's research, the word nostalgia has slowly lost its negative reputation, but not entirely. You see, nostalgia is a bittersweet emotion. On one hand, it brings us comfort and makes us feel loved and connected when we remember all the times our loved ones cared for us, or of a time in our life where everything was going right. On the other hand, it makes us feel sad that those things are gone and scared that we might never experience them again. A great example of this is when Abraham Lincoln visited his childhood home after 20 years. He arrived and found the place in ruin. Saddened by what he saw, he wrote this poem. My childhood home I see again and saddened with the view. As still as memory clouds my brain, there's pleasure in it too. Because although it saddened him to see that he would never be able to experience those emotions again, remembering the times he spent in the house and the happiness it brought him when he was younger brought happy thoughts to his memory. Positive feelings of nostalgia make you thankful for what you've had and give you the desire to keep moving forward. Perhaps you might even be able to recreate that amazing feeling or even experience something better in the future. Negative feelings of nostalgia, however, make you feel like your life was better in the past. You might even start to beat yourself up for choices you made in the past because you think whatever decisions you made are negatively affecting your life today. You get stuck in a cycle of thoughts about the past that basically leaves you frustrated, defeated, and stuck. When things like that happen, it's often because you haven't taken the time out to process that experience. It has happened, but you didn't give your brain enough time to mourn it and move on from it. You put up a wall, you seal it away as many of us do. However, once you can truly process the experience and come to terms with what came from it, you'll stop experiencing the negative nostalgic feeling that's associated with that particular memory. One of the best things about the feeling of nostalgia is that it's all about you, and people love themselves more than anything else. Most human emotions we feel are felt as a result of external forces. We get sad when something doesn't go our way. We get disappointed in people when they do something unexpected that we'd rather they didn't. We get angry at people when they do something to agitate us. But nostalgia, nobody does anything to us. In fact, oftentimes, we can't pinpoint the trigger for our nostalgia. All we know is that a few times a week, we remember our old life with friends, family, and times we shared with loved ones. And as memories cloud our brain, there's pleasure in it too. Now, this does not mean that outside forces can't trigger nostalgia. As we all know, advertisers have discovered the power of nostalgia, and they use it to their advantage all the time. That's why you have Disney remaking all of their best cartoons. They're trying to make people nostalgic, so they flock to the cinemas, trying to recapture a moment of their previous lives. But unlike trying to make someone feel happy or sad for a character in a movie, trying to make someone feel nostalgic is very tricky and can often backfire. Like, just look at the Lion King live-action movie, the first Sonic the Hedgehog trailer, and more recently, Tom and Jerry. All three of these movies tried to make people nostalgic, but they failed completely in their goal. Why? Because nostalgia is a very complex emotion. The question, who am I, has plagued humanity for millennia. Every 5 years, every single atom in your body will have been replaced by a different atom. Your thoughts, opinions, and feelings about things will have also changed. Sometimes where you live and your friends may have even changed. So who are you? Is there one true aspect to your being that stamps you as being one of one? What part of us acts as the random seed hash that is tied to our existence? The best philosophers, scientists, and psychologists have had a go at the question, but all to no avail. And while nostalgia certainly doesn't answer the question, it helps us calm the anxiety it causes. We can say that what makes you, you, are your specific memories about the past, all of which tell you about how you've changed and become the person you are today. They tell you that you are a continuous being, one whose existence grows linearly with time. When we're feeling like a failure, like we don't have any purpose in life, like we have no value or any meaning, we can often tap into our nostalgic memories for comfort, to calm our worrying minds and to remind us that we do have intrinsic value, that we are not failures with no purpose. We have friends, family, and healthy experiences we can cling on to. Nostalgia usually happens when there's a major life transition, like when you're going off to college, moving to a new city, traveling across the world, or getting married. It's like our brains are trying to grab hold of who we were even as we're still learning who we are and discovering who we want to be. Right now, people are feeling nostalgic more than ever. And honestly, that's exactly what a year in lockdown will do to you. We begin to feel nostalgic when we see live performances we went to in the past, large family gatherings we used to detest, and even little things like the noise of a busy grocery store or kids screaming on airplanes. Maybe not the last one. Because we're limited in our ability to go out and create new experiences, our brain is rerunning the old ones again and again and again to give us that sense of warmth and connection that many of us are missing in our daily lives right now. The internet has modified everything we used to do as a society. Mobs have morphed into cancel culture. We no longer have to be physically present at work or school, and we now even have a dedicated day to feel nostalgic. Social media calls it TBT, or Throwback Thursday. Every Thursday, people post nostalgic photos of both themselves and of a time period to sit back and reflect on what once was. We also have things like Snapchat, Facebook, and Google Photos, bringing us memories of pictures we've taken from a few years ago. Having all of these memories flood not just our minds, but also our phone screens, without having the ability to make new ones, and you can see why people are feeling nostalgic now more than ever before. We also see nostalgia in sports. For years, there's been the very heated debate of who's the GOAT, who is the greatest athlete of all time. In the NBA, you often hear of LeBron versus Jordan. But in reality, even if LeBron James ends his career with more titles than Michael Jordan, MJ will always still have the nostalgia factor on his side. He's many people's childhood, and no one will ever argue that their sports idol, the one who they watched while they were growing up, isn't the GOAT. However, with enough time, the modern day GOATs turn into old legends, and slowly but surely, get outshined by new and rising talent. The arguments we have today will be the same arguments we have in the future, only with different people and different nostalgic factors. Nostalgia is a very interesting emotion, because we all in some way want to feel it, even if it brings us both happiness and pain. Oftentimes, the best memories are the ones we remember with both happiness and sadness. On days when we feel our worst, it makes us feel sad, angry, and even scared that we might never get those things, those feelings again. But even on those days, nostalgia has the power to bring us hope, and make us realize that we all have a story that is still being written. Why do we remember the past and not the future? Do we exist in time? Or does time exist in us? What does it really mean to say time passes? Wonder is the source of our desire for knowledge, and nostalgia helps us remember how far our curiosity can take us. From where we were, to where we are, to where we will be, nostalgia will be there all along the way. You were on your way home when you died. It was a car accident. Nothing particularly remarkable, but fatal nonetheless. You left behind a wife and 2 children. It was a painless death. The EMTs tried their best to save you, but to no avail. Your body was so utterly shattered that you were better off. Trust me. And that's when you met me. Wait, what happened? You asked. Where am I? You died, I said, matter-of-factly. No point in mincing words. There was a truck, and it was skidding. Yep, I said. I died? Yup, but don't feel bad about it. Everyone dies, I said. You looked around. There was nothingness. Just you and me. What is this place? You asked. Is this the afterlife? More or less, I said. Are you God? You asked. Yup, I replied. I'm God. Few things capture our imagination quite like death. It's going to happen to us. We know it's going to happen to us. And yet, we live our lives pretending that it's not going to happen. Not to us, at least we think. Not right now. We run away from it every chance we get. And yet, somehow, we are preoccupied with it. Almost simultaneously, we ignore death and worship its possibility. We write books about how life is short, but we never really live like it is. Who are we? What do you think happens after death? My kids. My wife, you said. What about them? Will they be alright? That's what I like to see, I said. You just died and your main concern is for your family. That's good stuff right there. You looked at me with fascination. To you, I didn't look like God. I just looked like some man. Or possibly a woman? Some vague authority figure, maybe. More of a grammar school teacher than the Almighty. Don't worry, I said. They'll be fine. Your kids will remember you as perfect in every way. They didn't have time to grow contempt for you. Your wife will cry on the outside, but will be secretly relieved. To be fair, your marriage was falling apart. If it's any consolation, she'll feel very guilty for feeling relieved. Oh, you said. So what happens now? Do I go to heaven or hell or something? Neither, I said. You'll be reincarnated. Ah, you said. So the Hindus were right. All religions are right in their own way, I said. Walk with me. You followed along as we strode through the void. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. Nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes, in this body, from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. And worn-out garments are shed by the body. Worn-out bodies are shed by the dweller within the body. New bodies are donned by the dweller, like garments. These are the words from the Bhagavad Gita, one of the holy scriptures of Hinduism. In it are verses about the seemingly unending cycle of life and of reincarnation. Every version of a being acts and reacts, and their actions determine how they are going to be manifested in the next life. We commonly refer to this as karma. This continues nearly eternally, till the soul yearns for a higher sense of being, which it can ultimately achieve once it rids itself of all desires, ego, or pleasure. The yearning for a higher being is only truly meant when no such yearning exists. So, is this life, the one we're living right now, just a mere test? Where are we going? Nowhere in particular, I said. It's just nice to walk while we talk. So what's the point then? You asked. When I get reborn, I'll just be a blank slate, right? A baby. So all my experiences and everything I did in this life won't matter. Not so, I said. You have within you all the knowledge and experiences of all your past lives. You just don't remember them right now. I stopped walking and took you by the shoulders. Your soul is more magnificent, beautiful, and gigantic than you can possibly imagine. A human mind can only contain a tiny fraction of what you are. It's like sticking your finger in a glass of water to see if it's hot or cold. You put a tiny part of yourself into the vessel, and when you bring it back out, you've gained all the experiences it had. You've been a human for the last 48 years, so you haven't stretched out enough yet and felt the rest of your immense consciousness. If we hung out here for long enough, you'd start remembering everything. But there's no point in doing that between each life. How many times have I been reincarnated then? Oh, lots and lots, and into lots of different lives, I said. This time around, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in 1540 AD. Wait, what? You stammered. You're sending me back in time. Well, I guess technically, time as you know it only exists in your universe. Things are different where I come from. Where do you come from? You said. Oh, sure, I explained. I come from somewhere. Somewhere else. And there are others like me. I know you want to know what it's like there, but honestly you wouldn't understand. Oh, you said, a little let down. But wait, if I get reincarnated to other places in time, I could have interacted with myself at some point. Sure, it happens all the time. And with both lives only aware of their own lifespan, you don't even know what's happening. Other religions such as Islam or Christianity don't quite preach the idea of reincarnation. But when you look through the pages, they too treat this life as a test. It is the afterlife where life achieves completion and we get to live. Truly. What you do in this life determines the fate of what your soul will be. While the concept of death is slightly different across certain religions and theologies, in that some of it happens over and over again, and in others you die once but live twice. Nearly all religions encourage followers to think about the cascading effects of their actions at a macro scale. There are more famous ideas in this realm, of course. The simulation theory is just one of the more famous ones, where reality is potentially reduced to a high-definition video game running in some scrawny teenager's basement. It's his reality, and you and I are living in it. This certainly is not as grandiose of a possibility as something from scripture, but the logic that leads one to the simulation theory is ironclad. What does this all mean then? So what's the point of it all? Seriously, I asked. Seriously, you're asking me for the meaning of life. I mean, isn't that a little stereotypical? Well, it's a reasonable question, you pestered. I looked you in the eye. The meaning of life, the reason I made this whole universe, is for you to mature. You mean mankind, you want us to mature. No, just you. I made this whole universe for you. With each new life, you grow and mature and become a larger and greater intellect. Just me. What about everyone else? There is no one else, I said. In this universe, there's just you and me. You stared blankly at me. But all the people on Earth, all you, different incarnations of you. Wait, I'm everyone. Now you're getting it, I said, with a congratulatory slap on the back. I'm every being who ever lived, or who will ever live. Yes. I'm Abraham Lincoln, and you're John Wilkes Booth too, I added. I'm Hitler, you replied, and you're the millions he killed. I'm Jesus, and you're everyone who followed him. You fell silent. Every time you victimized someone, I said, you were victimizing yourself. Every act of kindness you've done to yourself. Every happy and sad moment ever experienced by any human was, or will be, experienced by you. You thought for a long time. Why? You asked me. Why do all of this? Because someday, you will become like me. Because that's what you are. You're one of my kind. You're my child. You mean I'm a god? No, not yet. You're a fetus. You're still growing. Once you've lived every human life throughout all time, you will have grown enough to be born. So the whole universe, you said, it's just an egg, I answered. Now it's time for you to move on to your next life. And I sent you on your way. Whether you believe in an organized religion or not, we've all wondered what happens when our eyes close for that one last time. Maybe we watch our lifeless bodies as our souls float away. Maybe we try to call upon our loved ones to let them know it's all going to be okay, but they just never listen. Maybe nothing happens at all. Maybe there is no meaning. Andy Weir's short story, supposedly written in less than an hour, does talk about an afterlife scenario, but that's not really the message he's trying to deliver. Maybe his point is to highlight the ability of every person to be both the worst manifestation of humanity, but also be the best of it. Andy poses this when he says that the protagonist was both Hitler and the people he killed. It's hypothetical, of course. But then again, how far are we at any given time from the worst version of ourselves? I often find myself looking at pictures of famous, or infamous people for that matter, as babies. In the backdrop of reality, these baby faces can remind us about the innocence every human is capable of. Perhaps one of the lessons from the egg theory is to remind people of the power of a situation to turn us into who we are. This is not to absolve anyone of their wrongdoing or take away from the gravity of their actions, but a chance to shed light on the fact that a lot of who we are is quite simply circumstance, and that we might be better able to prevent future atrocities if we're able to foresee the circumstances that lead to them. This was, in large part, the focus of the now infamous Stanford prison experiments. College students were hired to play either guard or prisoner, and their behavior would then be studied. In just over a day, the power imbalance had manifested into near total tyranny, where the guards would abuse the prisoners to such an extent that a lot of them had to be discharged from the experiments. This ultimately led to the termination of the study after just 6 days. Some say the guards behaved like this because these guards were inherently bad people. Others say it was the power imbalance that was always set for an outcome like this. I urge you to read into it yourself, but these studies do demonstrate, and quite reassuringly so, that there may be more bad circumstances than bad people in this world. The egg theory also need not only be about righteousness or evil, it can also be about looking at life through the eyes of others. Perhaps we would think of life differently if we could see ourselves through the eyes of a loved one. We often tend to be harsh on ourselves for mistakes, but if a friend were to make the same mistake, we would try and support them. Why should we treat ourselves harsher than we would treat a friend? Imagine being a parent and finally getting to understand their worries when they said they couldn't sleep when you didn't call. Imagine how we might rethink our worldviews if we could look at things through the eyes of someone who disagrees with us. In fact, that is supposedly the origin of the story. Not some near-death experience that Andy Weir had, but rather a disagreement with his want. What would a world like that be? When empathy becomes more than just leaving words unsaid, and turns into a feeling, an emotion that you don't have to interpret, but rather feel yourself. There is also the concept of being reborn and carrying over your lessons into the next life. What would you become if you could live again? If you knew then what you know now, how would you do things differently? What if you never got that chance? Who am I kidding? Luckily, we get that chance every day. As Confucius once said, every man has 2 lives, and the second starts when he realizes he has just one. On the 23rd of March, 2016, Microsoft released a new chatbot named Tay on Twitter. Described by Microsoft as an experiment in conversational understanding, Tay was built to have conversations with people through tweets and DMs with the slang of the internet. In the words of its creators, Tay was meant to be, and I quote, Microsoft's AI fam from the internet that's got zero chill. I don't know. Tay was designed to learn more about human language as she interacted with people through their tweets. She was to learn the patterns of our communication and then emulate it when trying to create her own speech. Tay's first few tweets were fun and harmless. However, in just a few hours, everyone was in horror as Tay started tweeting the most offensive things imaginable. Things along the lines of, and again, I quote, "Bush did 9/11 and Hitler would have done a better job." In just 16 hours, Tay tweeted 95,000 times, with the majority of her tweets being extremely abusive and offensive. In less than a day, Microsoft had to suspend the account and the entire experiment. A complete social failure if you ask me, but it did do its job the way it was programmed to do. Tay was not designed to think for herself. She was built to learn from the language that was spoken to her. And so when people recognized that she was nothing more than a parrot bot, they intentionally started tweeting the most insensitive and offensive things at her, tweets she echoed right back into the world. Sadly, many people today are like Tay. We constantly feed ourselves with the same type of information, and without pausing for a minute to verify what is fact and form an unbiased opinion. Many of us simply echo everything we think right back into the world. Although we like to think that every opinion we have and every decision we make is down to our own best judgment and independent assessment, that's simply not true. More often than not, our opinions, beliefs, views, and thoughts about the world are influenced by a larger group of people. Research has shown that when presented with multiple options, we often mimic the choice of the people around us. Rather than spending time researching, asking questions, or learning about the different options to find out the best one for us, we often defer to the social norm. This is how humans have always been. We are social animals after all. However, now more than ever, it's becoming more and more important to think for yourself. A few decades ago, we only had a handful of different thoughts that we were exposed to, so it was easy to filter all of them and figure out what was right for us. But thanks to the internet and social media, there are billions of people with completely different worldviews, ideologies, and beliefs, and the societal norm is changing so rapidly that there's no time to pause and think, wait, is this really right for me? If you're not subscribed to my channel, there's a high chance that the YouTube algorithm brought you here. And if that's the case, hi. You see, algorithms are great. They bring everything we want right to our doorsteps. But there's one big problem. Slowly, they're beginning to dictate our lives. They're starting to think for us. First, it's content-based platforms like YouTube and Netflix suggesting things to you to watch. Soon, you're watching everything not because you searched for it, but because the algorithm suggested it. And to a large extent, this looks harmless. It exposes you to content you otherwise might not have seen, and gives smaller creators the chance to blow up without having an established pedigree. It's literally the reason Aperture has grown to the size it's at today. But then you have Amazon's algorithm that tells you all the products you should add to your cart alongside the one purchase you made. Then Gmail Smart Reply telling you how to reply to emails, and Tinder telling you who you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with. Before you know it, we give the algorithm the driver's seat, and we become passengers in our own lives, merely coasting through the roads we are suggested. This in and of itself is a problem, but the fact that the algorithm is not perfect makes it an even bigger one. For one, the algorithms that are now thinking for us don't actually think. They simply find patterns and parrot them. Once they realize we like or agree with a certain thing, we are constantly fed with that one thing. And in a short while, we find ourselves in an echo chamber, where everything we see and hear are only things we've agreed with in the past. It doesn't give much room for change, for growth, for the opportunity to listen to opposing arguments and learn. Think about it. How many times have you randomly found a video on YouTube that you completely disagreed with? Compare that to how many times you found a video that you enjoyed and completely agreed with. The difference is probably incredible. And the better the algorithms become, the better they will be at serving you that information that you already agree with. This leads to confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports your prior beliefs or values. Because these algorithms constantly surround us with ideas that we already agree with, we quickly block our minds to every shred of evidence that contradicts this bias. There's a subtle difference between the desire to have been right and the desire to be right. The desire to have been right prevents us from seeing the real truth, causing us to hold on to ideas that might be illogically and factually flawed. We fail to see how we're wrong, and so we fail to learn and grow. We hold on to beliefs that we have been surrounded by, so much so that we start to seek out evidence to back up our bias and not to find out the truth. The truth is that humans find it very difficult to process information in an unbiased and rational manner once they've developed strong feelings or sentiments about the issue. So people interpret everything they see in a way that already agrees with everything they know and believe about the world. Some people believe in something called extrasensory perception. So, for example, they remember all the times they were thinking about their mom and picked up their phone only to see that she was calling. It seems like fate in a way, but yet they forget all the times when mom called when they weren't thinking about her, and the other times when they were thinking about mom but she never called. Because they believe so strongly in extrasensory perception, they are far more likely to remember instances that back up their claims, even when the instances that don't agree with those claims occur far more frequently. To make our confirmation bias even worse, social media has created the influencer culture. People like me, apparently. Now, not only do we look to each other for guidance, we look to influencers, gurus, and thought leaders. Because we consider these people part of our packs, more so than traditional celebrities, we often place them on incredibly high pedestals, giving them the opportunity to, well, influence us. People buy a product because an influencer said so, even when the product might not be the best option for them. They employ unsafe dieting practices and workout routines just because an influencer said it'll work without doing the research for what works for their own body. People listen to fake gurus and influencers, and without taking the time to think for themselves, they do exactly what these people tell them to do, even if it's unhealthy and potentially dangerous. One of the biggest reasons people no longer seem to think for themselves is because they are scared of the repercussions. How can you think for yourself when sharing ideas that are not in accordance with the societal norm gets you exiled from society? When you could lose your job, your education, everything you've ever worked for, simply for thinking differently and expressing those different opinions. Yes, I'm talking about cancel culture. The real victims of cancel culture are the ideas that will be left unsaid, the thoughts left in the mind for fear of extreme backlash. It's the beliefs that are only expressed in the dark, where the big bright eyes of Big Brother cannot see. To prevent the rats from coming out, Big Brother urges you to double think. To prevent yourself from getting cancelled, a relatively new phenomenon, society urges you to groupthink. Coined by Irving Janis in 1972, groupthink simply means avoiding conflict by swiftly reaching an agreement without evaluating other options or alternative ideas. It means to bend your back to the societal norm without giving other ideas a second thought. The danger of this is that our individuality and uniqueness dies, and the world moves to a point where we all collectively agree on the same ideas. No difference in thought, no individual ideas, just groupthink. But it doesn't have to be this way. To think for yourself is a skill you must learn, else you become a puppet of someone else's programming. To think for yourself is to challenge your existing ideas, beliefs, and decisions. Ask yourself, are my thoughts mine, or are they simply influenced by everyone around me? My friends, my parents, society, influencers, and so on. To think for yourself is to look at the evidence, to investigate and to use thoughtful analysis. Understand that all of us battle with confirmation bias. We all want to seem to fit in, and so remember to not shy away from ideas that might negate your existing bias. To think for yourself is to battle with your mind. Go out there and find the roots of the ideas you support, and then find opposing arguments. Look at your newfound beliefs as diamonds encased in a rock. Before you get to the fine jewel in the middle, you must break through the rock with a lot of force, but carefully and diligently. Before you fully accept a new way of thinking, make sure that you've broken through the rock by wrestling with these new ideas in a way that might take you out of your comfort zone. To think for yourself is to go out there in search of information. Don't wait for an algorithm to keep echoing the things you already know. Acquire new knowledge. Feed your mind continuously by reading, listening, and discussing these big new ideas with a view from both sides. Break your pattern of thought and view everything the world has to say through your own lenses. To think for yourself is to be humble in your knowledge. One of the reasons people fall into the trap of confirmation bias is that they don't want to be wrong. We've built this idea for some reason that we have to protect ourselves from being wrong. People seem to pride themselves as intellectuals and knowledgeable, and disconfirming evidence goes against that notion. So they shy away from it, keeping themselves in the dark about the truth, simply because they want to keep up the facade of being right. Don't be scared of being wrong. There's literally nothing wrong with it. Remember, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe and that everything revolved around us. We're egocentric. We enjoy feeling important, and being right gives us that sense of superiority. But, in my mind, I feel as if you should be more concerned about finding out what's right and not craving the state of being right. To think for yourself is to be courageous, to not buckle under fear, pressure, or guilt. To stand up for what you believe in, as long as you have come to see it as the truth for yourself. To think for yourself is standing out and not going along with the crowd simply for the sake of keeping the so-called peace and avoiding confrontation. Because the truth is, we would have no new scientific discovery if the old ideas were never challenged. Everything we believe about the world today is a product of someone thinking outside of the box, challenging the status quo. We must do the same. Being a free thinker opens the avenue to ideas that some of us may never truly experience. And new ideas are something we can all benefit from as individuals. There is no progress without change, and there is no change without admitting there's a problem in the first place. You are a chicken. Yes, you. You look around and sometimes wonder why your owner takes such good care of you. At first, you're not sure. You're skeptical. What if he sends you to the slaughterhouse? In life, anything is possible. Because we can never fully understand how the world works, and the laws of physics prevent us from being able to tell the future, everything we predict is a probability. Some are a lot more probable, others are less probable, while some have astronomically low chances of ever happening. The probability is vanishingly small, but it remains non-zero. Would you get hit by a car? Will you get struck by lightning? Will we ever achieve world peace? If there is a chance that anything can happen, what are the odds? I was scrolling through the deepest parts of the internet one day when I came across this man, Roy Cleveland Sullivan, the man who has been hit by lightning 7 times in his lifetime. The odds of getting struck by lightning once isn't that low, it's just about 1 in 15,000. Even if you live in a small town, chances are that somebody in that town has been struck by lightning at least once. The odds of being struck 7 times in a period of 80 years? That's a 1 in 10 to the 28 chance. This seems like such incredible and unfortunate odds, until you consider the fact that you're more likely to get struck by lightning 7 times than you are to shuffle a deck of cards into perfect numerical order. Those odds? 1 in 10 to the 68. Probability is something that we can't really comprehend as humans. If we did, we'd stop worrying about a lot of things and stop taking granted for most of the things we should be worried about. Like sharks. No thanks to the movie Jaws, humans now have an immense fear of sharks. But the reality is, you're more likely to get killed by a vending machine than you are to get killed by a shark. The odds of getting killed by a vending machine are 1 in 112 million, while the odds of getting killed by a shark are a staggering 1 in 250 million. Now, the odds that you'll be attacked by a shark are much lower at 1 in 3.7 million, but even that is still too high for the monsters we've branded sharks to be. For context, you're more likely to get killed by a dog at a 1 in 112,400 chance than you are to get killed by a shark, but we still keep them in our homes as loving pets. You're more likely to get killed by hornets, wasps, or bees at 1 in 63,225 than you are to get killed by a shark. In fact, you're more likely going to get killed by the government for committing murder at 1 in 119,000 than you are of getting killed by a shark. When you put a little thought into it, you realize that most of the time, our fears are sensational and not rational. When something tragic happens and it garners a lot of public attention, we are more likely to be afraid of that thing, even if it is much less common than the less notorious things. The most prominent example of this is the way we treat plane crashes. Now yes, when planes do crash, it is tragic. But because they cause such a big spectacle and have lots of media coverage, we forget that it is still by far the safest way to travel. Passenger airplane incidents are very rare, and your odds of dying in a plane crash are very slim at 1 in 205,000. That's incredibly low when you compare it to your odds of dying in a car accident, which is just 1 in 107. For motorcycle riders, it's 1 in 890, and even pedestrians aren't safe at 1 in 541. But wait, maybe the reason the airplane deaths are so low has to do something with our fear. Before people go on an airplane, they usually prepare well in advance. No harmful objects are allowed on board, and there's always usually more than one designated pilot who has trained for years on safety practices before they were ever allowed to fly a plane. Compare that to road travel, where we don't really think that much about it, and you can maybe see why things are the way they are. And with the odds that you'll be involved in a drunk driving accident in your lifetime being incredibly high at 2 in 3, you can see what I mean. We barely give it any thought. Hopefully, we can all do better. Try to reduce the risk by simply designating a driver beforehand or taking an Uber when you go out for fun.
Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Incogni. What are the odds that your information will be leaked in a data breach? If you didn't know, it's pretty high and it's getting worse. A report from Identity Theft Resource Center showed that there were 68% more data breaches in 2021 than there were in 2020. Unfortunately, the only way to stop this is a very tedious process. You need to email every single data broker and request that they delete the information they have about you. You then have to go through all the hoops, reply to all their objections, and fight desperately for your own privacy. Because of how valuable your data is to these companies, this process can genuinely take years, but Incogni can help you guarantee your privacy the easy way. All you have to do is create an account and grant them the right to work for you, and that's it. Incogni will reach out to data brokers on your behalf to request all your personal data be deleted and deal with any objection from the data brokers. It's literally that easy. To get started, sign up using the link in the description. The first 100 people to use code Aperture with the link below get 20% off of Incogni. It's completely risk-free for 30 days, so I encourage every one of you to at least give it a try, and if you're not happy, you get a full refund anyway. But I can assure you, when you see just how many data brokers have your information, you'll definitely want to keep your subscription. Back to our story.
Another thing we should be worried about is right-handed appliances. Yes, it's true that most of the world is right-handed, for some reason. But if we're learning anything as a species, it's inclusiveness. We must do the same with dominant hands because, as it is, the odds of a left-handed person dying simply because they used a right-handed appliance wrong is 1 in 7 million. And while the chances look ridiculously slim, it has to happen to somebody. If you don't die, hey, you'll get a lot of free money from that lawsuit. The ambidextrous people among us can help us decide what appliances are better suited for what dominant hand. And we have a surprising amount of them, 1 in 100 to be exact. Now this does not include people who have had to learn how to use their non-dominant hand because of injury or out of curiosity. It's just people who are born with an amazing control of both of their hands. Art is very subjective. What some people might find beautiful, others will find ugly. What one might consider great acting, others might see it as over the top and annoying. You see, much unlike science, art doesn't have a definitive set of rules, and so they don't have a strict guideline for judgment either. And while this allows for creativity, it also makes it very difficult to find success in the world of the arts. If you want to be a surgeon, for instance, you know that if you pass the med school exams, intern, go through residency, and so forth, you'll make it. You have a set path to follow. But if you want to be a supermodel, or a rock star, or a YouTuber, it's not that straightforward. You have to work hard at it, every single day. And even then, your odds are very slim. You can be a theater kid all your life, go to film school, practice as much as possible. But in the end, the odds that you'll become a movie star aren't very encouraging, at just 1 in 1.1 million. It's amazing so that even with the odds as slim as this, every year, thousands of people will travel from all parts of the world to LA, trying to fulfill their dreams of being on the big screen. When interestingly, you have a much better chance of winning an Oscar at just 1 in 11,500 than becoming a movie star. But of course, this Oscar includes all the technical awards that are given when everyone is taking a bathroom break. And most people would much rather take a 1 in 1.1 million chance than to receive an award when no one's watching. If you're a writer, however, the odds are slightly in your favor. There is a 1 in 220 chance that you'll write a New York Times bestseller. If you put in the time and the effort necessary, these odds are definitely going to go up, bringing you that inch closer to making your dream a reality. Sports are closer related to science than arts, because most of the time, if you work at it hard enough, you'll achieve some kind of success. But how hard can you work when there's only so many medals to go around? Millions of people around the world dedicate their entire lives to competing in the Olympics, yet only 1 in 662,000 will ever win a medal. And that's the thing about scarcity. When there's such limited space, the odds of ever being able to do or acquire said thing just gets increasingly thinner. Think about the number of children who have worn a spacesuit and helmet to career day in school and told everybody that they want to be astronauts. Now think about the fact that the odds of becoming an astronaut are 1 in 12.1 million, and you get sad for those little kids whose dreams will one day have to be crushed. What if they wanted to be president? Well, the chance of becoming a US president is 1 in 10 million, unless you're a religious 6-foot-tall Harvard Law graduate and military veteran. Then your odds go up astronomically, especially if you're a Harvard alumni, because as surprising as it might sound, the odds that the President of America has attended Harvard is 1 in 3.58. So if you want to have the best chance at becoming president, you know what school to apply for. However, getting into Harvard is almost as difficult as becoming president when you're done. With a chance of just 4.6% of getting in, you might want to apply to some backup schools as well. At the end of the day, we all just want to be successful. Whether it's through the arts, or going through the so-called traditional route of finishing college and getting a good job. We all just want to have enough money to live comfortably while we're still young. But sadly, the odds are stacked against us. There's a slim chance of just between 6.4% and 22.3% that you'll become a millionaire, with different factors like race, education, wealth status, and age helping to place you somewhere in that range. While the chance of becoming a billionaire? Well, there's 8 billion humans in the world, and only around 2,000 billionaires, so basically, non-existent. Getting old has a bittersweet taste to it. On the one hand, you're getting wiser, more mature, and you have a much better understanding of the world than you did when you were younger. But on the other hand, you're also getting weaker, you're forgetting things more. And sadly, your body just keeps breaking down, one after the other, and the stats don't really help at all. If you're under 20 right now, there's a 1 in 4 chance that you'll be disabled before you retire. And it gets worse. There's a 1 in 2 chance that at the age of 75, you'll have disabling hearing loss. This is why whenever people say they want to work hard now so they can enjoy their retirement, I kind of feel bad for them.